I've got to manage myself, I've got to manage my mind. The task is not easy, but to high heights I climb.
I'm determined to succeed, so no excuses, please. If you don't want success in life, then don't hinder me. Yes, let the whole world know you are a CEO. You are a CEO. I'm a CEO. You are a CEO. I'm a CEO. The time is here to celebrate. You are a CEO. You are a CEO. You are a CEO. You are a CEO. Yes, let the whole world know. The time is here to celebrate. Success is calling, so don't be late. You are a CEO.
Hello, everyone. I'm Michaeleparker, and we're here for another exciting show. And I want to always remind you, as you can see on the screen, make sure you subscribe to our YouTube channel and join our Facebook group. But this is tonight, October 21st. Time is moving so fast, and that's why we need to have these shows to keep us on the move. October 21st, this is Freedom from Real Estate. Now, when you think about that and the word freedom, it automatically makes you think about we're in bondage to something. And so I want to talk to you really quick about why this show is so important. But first, I want to introduce to you Miss Gina Cooper. And Gina is one of our broker associates for City First. Welcome to the show.
Thank you.
Listen, we had a great show called The Center of Real Estate, Wealth, the Center of Real Estate. So, or I should say Real Estate, the Center of Wealth. And when we talked about that, we got raving reviews. There were so many things that you shared. And so I just want to thank you for coming back on the show.
Thank you for having me.
So we're going to talk tonight about a lot of different things. And these are things that I know that are near and dear to you, because I know you really care about people not really understanding the bondage that's associated with just American culture and how it can hold us back. Are you excited to be talking about this tonight?
I am. It's my favorite stuff because I was poor America at one time, and I know what it did for me. I share it with anyone that wants to listen.
Well, listen, we're going to do a lot of sharing in here tonight, and we're going to do some sharing with programs that we can offer in the near future. And I know you and I are working on that, and I'm just so excited about that. So let's jump in. So let's start off with just a few things. This is a quote that I often like to refer to, that Harriet Tubman said, "I freed 1,000 slaves. I could have freed 1,000 more if only they knew they were slaves." So when you hear this, Gina, how do you feel? Because I think this is so true today. I mean, it's one thing to be in slavery, but to not know you're in it is even worse.
Right. Well, people today, they're so accustomed to what they've been taught, they don't think outside of the box. They don't realize there's more to getting an education, there's more to real estate. So when you start out with a mindset, then you're basically in bondage to that which you've been taught.
Right.
And know nothing else.
Right, and you're limited to what you know. And that's, I mean, well, let's give a little education here tonight. And I know you love this topic and just kind of walking through what really happened in this country. Let's take a step back. So if we go back to when Europe came here, and you know, we know what happened with the Native Americans in terms of how the land was taken over. And that was still a real estate transaction.
Yes,
you know,
it was.
I mean, it was by force, it was very violent, but they were taking land. And so isn't it interesting that, I mean, a lot of this started with real estate?
It is real estate, and then you're also looking at different governments. So in the beginning, it wasn't individuals, it was only kings that owned land. So the king would take over an area with his soldiers, and then they would say that that's their land. They'd let the people farm the land and pay rent through taxes or a portion of their crops. But they didn't actually get to own any land.
Right. So this is, again, that mentality is what Europe came to this area with in their mind of, you know, land being for the king, and what is conquered is kept by the wealthy.
Right, it was an unexplored area, and they went to it and said, okay, here's new land for us that we, you know, because crops don't grow too well in certain areas.
Right.
So for, you know, them to come over and they say, okay, well, we just have to take over these Native Americans, it's pretty easy.
Right.
So they took that land for England. But then you had France that came in and got a part, and so it still was all by kingship at that time.
Wow, wow, very good history, very good history. Let's continue. So we know that when you think about this land, you know, I think it was, you know, a lot of different historical moments where we saw people were brought here from Africa. And we know specifically in 1619 that things really began to escalate where, I mean, the transatlantic slave trade and people coming to this area, I mean, it really wasn't about black and white. I mean, we're really dealing with this, you know, this land that was very fertile that now had a lot of opportunity. And so this is related to real estate again.
The whole thing is about real estate, because without land, you don't have anything. You have no food, you don't have access to different things. So the land is vital. It's like having resources like water. I
Right.
mean, some things you have to have.
Right.
So it was very important to get that land. So once you went past the time when, you know, it was kind of raw, and I think it was from the 1600s to the 1700s that the majority of the people started showing up. They had like they started out with 2,000, they got to closer to about 20, I think it was 25 million people. Then at that point, they needed to start colonizing, setting rules and different things like that. So at that point, when they made that change, you had the colonists, the colonies, and then at that point, then there was the war that broke out to get independence, which made America the United States.
Right, right. So when you, in the midst of all that, specific to slavery, that, you know, if you got a land rich in cotton and other things, if you could use free labor and have no expense for that and then own the land, I mean, it was a definite strong move from a wealth perspective for this country.
Well, yeah, it's the same concept of how it was in England. They owned all the land, and then they had the people that lived there. Well, they didn't have anybody that lived there really at that time, so they had to bring in people. You know, who's going to farm this land? There wasn't that many people there at the time, so that's when that got, you know, very heavily brought into the area.
Right.
So once you got past that, then you know, have all this money making. So that's the wealth of those people who started America.
Right.
You know, it was a huge amount of wealth that got developed.
Absolutely.
And a few people prospered. That's where the coin term of 1% got started.
Yeah.
And the 99% is the rest of us.
Yeah, absolutely.
So
this goes back to the foundation. So let's continue this a little bit more. So when you think about then, you know, America trying to organize itself more now. I mean, this was a lot going on, but there was a lot of people that they attribute to being the founding fathers. And, you know, a lot of things that start to take place. So you start getting, you know, this mentality, you know, that grew out of Europe coming in and now trying to organize things for this country. And then we even lead to, I'm going to jump ahead to the 1800s where now we have the Louisiana Purchase. And this is critical. I mean, and it has purchase, the word purchase is in the Louisiana Purchase, and we're still talking about land and real estate. How significant was the Louisiana Purchase?
Well, the Louisiana Purchase was at that time owned by France, and it was probably one of the most fertile areas. Plus you had the Mississippi running through there, which allowed the shipping of all of the goods to go out.
Yeah, yeah.
And so before that they actually purchased that, they passed a legislation that allowed them to buy it outside of how it would be done through kings and stuff. So there was a rule that was put into place on how to receive land to the United States. And that was under a part of thinking it's for the people. But they did it that way so they could buy the land. Then they turned around and sold it to the wealthy and made it seem like it was the government. But it really still is the 1% behind the scenes, because who could buy land at that time?
Right.
You know, you're just 1% came over, you're surviving, or you're in bondage by somebody. So how are you buying land?
Right.
So it was nothing but an economic movement. And so once they got that land, then it got farmed and it kept on moving.
Right. Now that's still the same thing going on today, where, you know, a lot of times people look at the government, you know, you can choose whatever side, Democrat, Republican, but that is really just, you know, kind of a figurehead in a bigger plan of how the wealthy stay wealthy. So wouldn't you say, I mean, that same mentality, the roots go back here?
Right, so when you go back to looking at the roots of England, they said that didn't work. We want to be free, but we still like their rules. So they brought a lot of the rules and laws and set it up, but instead of it benefiting the king, it benefited them. So
now, instead of just the king, there's maybe a 1% or what have you, that a broader group of people that could act like kings. So the more of the wealthy being the king now.
Right. So they just changed the rules to make it appear a certain way for the people.
Right.
But who was the people? They
exactly.
were.
Exactly. Who were the people? The ones
Right.
writing the laws, the ones doing the deals, the ones sharing the wealth. So that is really, just amazing, because we're going to talk more about that, but we're still living in that type of mentality, and most people don't see it, and that's why the political framework, although we should always, fight for things to be better, there's a much deeper game going on here.
Right. It really is not the government. It's the way that things have been repeated over and over. So if you tell a lie long enough, you believe it's to be true. You don't know anything else.
Right.
I have no way of knowing. I mean, this is what I was taught in school.
Yeah, absolutely. And we're going to
Doesn't
talk
make it
more
true.
about that. No, that's very, very true. So let's look at this this last area here, just from our historical lesson. It kind of brings us to the Civil War. And we know in the Civil War, in the 1860s and so forth, that eventually slavery was abolished, which had a lot to do with now, not being able to more openly use that type of free labor, which was a part of this economic system, the land, the real estate, the labor. And so you always had this wealthy group trying to figure out how to keep in the position that they were in, even though the world was changing. Right. So, how significant, and what are some of the things you think that was being considered when this took place?
Well, it was huge, and the reason being is if I'm making all of my money off of these crops or shipping, and then all of a sudden my labor is taken, and labor is one of the largest expenses any company has.
That's right.
So now all of a sudden I have a problem. My
Right.
wealth is going to be taken away if I don't have a way to put these crops, get them started, get them planted, raise them up, harvest them, and get them to the shipyards. So now what am I going to do?
Now, so this leaves us right where we want to be, and I hope everyone is really enjoying this segment. And this is just a tone setter. And I know you say we thought this was about real estate. It is about real estate. We talk about freedom. We got to talk about the bondage. And so we're going back in history a little bit here. We're going to take a short break, and when we come back, we're going to find out, what did they do next after understanding the labor is kind of going away. What do we do to keep that control amongst the wealthy, and what part did real estate play? And so we're going to go to a short clip, and remember, in honor of Breast Cancer Awareness Month, I want you to keep that in mind for all those fighting cancer out there. We're with you, we're supporting you, and want you to be the CEO of your health. We'll be right back to continue this great discussion. We are back, and we're still talking about freedom through real estate. And so, Gina, we left off in our last segment talking about the Civil War, slavery being abolished, but doesn't mean that, there was no more injustice and there wasn't still a wealthy few controlling things. And so now we're moving to another arena. And if we can pull up on the slide here, you see imagery of, where there was a lot of segregation. And back in 1877, you kind of started moving into this Jim Crow arena where, any laws that could help to separate and segregate classes of people is kind of denoted as Jim Crow. What role do you think this played, and why do you think this came about because of what had just taken place with the Civil War?
Well, once the Civil War happened, they had to find some way to replace things. But if you had freedom, then that meant you could take my job, you could take my land, you could take my crops. So now they have to find a way to oppress people. But it wasn't just the black race that was oppressed, it was also the poor whites.
Right.
So anyone at that time that wasn't of the 1% is targeted on keeping laws and rules to keep you oppressed.
Right, and that is so critical because there was an issue with race, there's no doubt about it, but there's a greater issue that has always existed, which is about economics. And,
Right.
and when it gets to economics, you know, the poor of all, you know, races will be hindered. And so do you feel that then, you know, do you feel it was the fear of these individuals getting access to things that said, let's separate all of the things through segregation to control who could get what?
Absolutely, because what happened, you have to remember, it's not like it is today. Back then, you didn't have wealth unless you were born into wealth. So
That's a
you're
good
going to
point.
do an awful lot to try to keep your position. So if that, back then they would kill folks over
That's right.
those different things, lands or whatever needed to, because that's how you survived.
Right.
And so I'm going to do everything necessary to protect my family, my wealth, and do what's necessary. So who makes the laws? The rich people. They're going to pass different things and say, oh, well, we're voting. Well, back then, blacks couldn't vote and neither could women.
That's right.
So we didn't have a say. So who had the say? Who
Right.
could vote?
Right, right.
You know?
Yeah.
So when you put it in those kind of context, you realize they're making the laws to control their wealth.
Right. So even back when all the land was owned by kings and things began to change, and even when America began to start to organize, and we see things written like, you know, we hold these truths to be self-evident that all men are created equal and so forth. We're really talking about a wealthy group of people talking about things being equal for them.
Right. They weren't thinking about the rest of us. The rest of us were their labor.
Right.
I don't care what color you were at a certain point in history.
Right.
We're still today the labor.
Right.
Who runs these corporations?
Yeah, no, absolutely. And I know, and Dr. King, right before he died, not that he still wasn't dealing with the issues of race, he started to focus a lot more on economics. And he was there actually marching about the garbage men in Memphis that were being unjustly treated. But he started to talk to poor whites, poor, people of color, all different groups, because the economic issues is what he began to expose. And it's ironic that not soon after that, he was killed.
Right. Economics is really the greed behind everything. So you're trying to protect, you're trying to grow so that you don't have to suffer, but you don't think about how it's going to affect everyone. So they realistically are creating different things to oppress, and it's been a challenge to get past that. So every time you look at someone's making a step, like Martin Luther King, the different things that he did, if they would have known how much better things would be afterwards, they would have supported it. So as you keep taking steps, you see we were in slavery, then it went to the poor people, then you went to, getting some basic things, and now you think you're free.
Right, and we're gonna get to that. We're gonna get to that. No, that's really good. So let's talk about, before we go there, let's talk about, let me show you this next slide here. So this was a really monumental image here of when the High Court really had banned segregation in the schools. So trying to bring the Jim Crow laws down. And now, you have this issue of, because one of the greatest ways to control economics is through education. Who knows what,
Right.
right? And so if now the public schools will be integrated and you got the wealthy seeing all groups coming into the same school with their kids, what impact do you think this had on our education system?
They had to look at what's being taught and make sure that it lined up with their agenda. So what are we going to teach? The basic reading, the basic math. You're not really learning real life, but they're making sure that you learn just enough to keep in the system.
Wow, what do you mean by that? To keep just enough to keep in the system?
Well,
that's a powerful statement.
In other words, if I need to keep you in a certain mentality to be the garbage man, or a certain mentality to be the nanny or the housekeeper, I have to limit what you know. Just like they did a long time ago, don't teach people to read. So if you think, whatever you get, that's what you think is.
Right.
And so when they had that mentality, they were learning just the basics so that they felt they were going somewhere, but they really were doing the same thing. You just changed the color of the crayon, so to speak.
Right, now that's almost a greater evil, to think you're free and not be free.
Right.
You know, it's almost worse than physical slavery to be in a situation where you think you're free and you see a few things on TV, or you see a few, entertainers maybe doing well, but in the behind the scenes, and the majority of the country is in an education system that teaches them to be in a working class, basically.
Right, and unless you have the money to do higher education, which
Right.
the wealthy always have private schools for their children. You know, you go to a certain age, grade, and then you're done.
Right.
And depending on the economics of your family, say, you look at the age, people normally have kids about their 20s. By the time they're in the 40s, the kids are somewhat grown.
Right.
Well, now dad might be getting sick because he's been working in the coal mine. Well, before you can finish your education, you got to go help to support the family.
Right.
Where the rich, they send their kids off to polishing school, whether it's to the military academies or the universities. So they have a lot more education. Now, those areas, you're going to get that education.
Yeah.
But the public school is exactly 12th grade.
Yeah.
That's all you're going to learn, and you're missing the most economic important items of life.
Right, and then not being at a dinner table or at the golf club where there's secrets being shared about how to work with banks and how to move money and how to leverage things that some people would never hear about because they're not in those circles where that knowledge and that IQ is there.
Right, you're spending your time doing physical labor. When you get home, you're done. Or you have things to do at the house. But the rich, they spend their days out negotiating.
Right.
They're thinking of things, they're planning things, and they're looking like who brokered the original real estate deal of the United States? You know, who did that?
Right.
That was one country to another country. It
Right.
wasn't people, it was the whole country. So that same system is trying to keep the education a certain way. So yes, we're providing education, yes, you get housing, but everything is so restricted that you get a job that makes a certain amount of money. But as soon as you start getting pay raises, what happens? Your rent goes up.
Right.
Food goes up, gas goes up, and the cycle keeps repeating.
Yeah, that's so true, and I really hope people are listening to what we're talking about, because when you have this history, you can really understand why things are the way they are, deeper than just going to a seminar or someone telling you to go invest in real estate. You have to understand the deeper. And before cutting to another clip, and we're going to go to this last area that you kind of hinted to, which is what's going on right now.
Right.
Where we really feel we're free, but are we really? And I'm reminded of some of the recent activities in the news where you've got some celebrities that are literally paying to have their kids go to certain schools, right?
So sad.
I mean, literally paying, and where these kids were not qualified. But, those are just the things that came out into the open. But how long and how often do these things go on where there's a circle of people who control education and control different forms of information that could help equal the playing field in terms of wealth and real estate?
Right, you might not remember this, but I do, because I'm older than you.
Yeah.
But when I went to school, they actually had counselors that would talk to you about what kind of trade you wanted to do.
Yeah.
So there wasn't any opportunity to think of anything outside of that. It's like, oh, are you gonna do janitorial? Or are you gonna be maybe a nurse?
Wow.
You
Wow.
were gonna work at the grocery store. So they would counsel you about that. So it was like putting the thoughts into your head from the time you were, I can remember in junior high school, preparing you to be a laborer.
That's something. And realizing, if you realize who really was behind the education system, that really makes sense.
Right.
Why they're training their workers.
Right, so we have a government in place that's run pretty much by the wealthy, and then they're saying, what do we need to have in place? They have a plan. We need to have a plan. So
Yeah.
their plan is how to keep their rich going and keep their cycles. So whether it was slavery or whether or not it's the new modern education, they're still putting things in a way that supports this government. If you had no workers, there'd be no taxes. If
Right.
there was no taxes, where would the government
Everything
be?
shuts down,
So it
yeah.
has to be done a certain way.
Yeah,
But we
yeah.
can be wise and extract, these are the rules, this
Yeah.
is where we live, but we can extract those things and build a safer way for ourselves and start building our own individual wealth so that we can survive
Yeah.
when things happen.
Very well said. And so this is, again, we're talking about freedom through real estate. All of you that are listening at this, I hope that you're just getting all this gold that we're talking about, because this is so important to society today, and specifically to the self-leaders out there, the CEOs out there of themselves. This is what we're talking about, freedom through real estate. And so we're going to take another short break, and when we come back, we're going to bring it home to where we are right now. We'll be right back.
What URCO means to me is that you are in charge of your life.
Being the CEO of your life, that concept that came from our founder, when he first brought out, you're the CEO of your backpack, you're the CEO of your bedroom, you're the CEO of your desk, you're the CEO of your car, of your trunk. I mean, who thought of that?
Through You Are a CEO, I was able to say, why do I think the way I think? And why are my values this way?
I really look at adversity as good. You learn about yourself through it, you know? And so I love it. Yeah, so that's what URCO is to me. It's a lifestyle, it's a mindset, it's life.
That's where being your own CEO comes in. Nobody can tell you what you can and can't do. So as far as you want to go, you can go.
Okay, so I'm gonna get my desk right, my cabinets right, I'm gonna get everything right because I'm a CEO.
You Are a CEO showed me step by step. Be aware of myself, be aware of others. Here's the information that you need.
Different things happen in life. It's going to happen, but how you handle that is very important.
I am CEO of everything. I do not let it in my life without being a CEO.
I say go with URCO.
Hello, everyone. Here we are back in studio, and we're still talking about freedom through real estate. And Gina, this has just been an exceptional show. I appreciate everything you've been sharing, everything that we've been talking about. This is so important to the URCO movement because we're about self-leadership and helping people. And I want to pick up on something that you kind of hinted at, which is how a lot that what we've talked about has led to where we are now, where we feel more free than ever, but there still is a form of bondage that people can't see. So I wanna cut to some quick slides here. So people talk about the American dream. You normally see a picket fence and a little dog and so forth, but now it looks a little bit more like this at times, where it feels like things are falling apart. Do you agree that the American dream, if you really could see the details, could also look like a nightmare?
Right. If you were to look at the climb of the corporate ladder, now you're willing to do just about anything. And they've groomed us to do these things. So who would normally, if you were to lay it out right now, okay, commute 2 hours a day, work 10 hours, and have no time with your family, would you sign up for that?
Not at all.
But that's what we have.
That's right.
That's what we
true.
have. And as soon as you get something, then it's taken from you. So if you were to make the wages and housing stayed the same, then you'd actually start to gain something. But who owns the majority of the housing?
Right.
The rich. I would say probably most all of your apartment complexes and commercial buildings are owned by the very wealthy. There's very few exceptions to that. So they have a balance sheet. So they go, okay, well, everyone's demanding pay raises, so we'll give the pay raises. But then we also know that that means that you're going to be getting, say, 30% more. Well, then all of a sudden here comes your rent increases. And it's just a constant cycle. And then also it's the learning. So it's like when you're learning only certain things, so they're teaching you basically to be in debt, starting out from the time you go to school, get student loans, do this, do that, to get this great high-paying job, and then you get this great high-paying job if you're fortunate enough to do that. If not, you're left with in debt. And even doctors, when they go into medical school, by the time they actually pick up residency, they're hundreds of thousands of dollars in debt.
Right.
It's going to take them a good amount of time to get out of that debt, but by that time, now you've got a wife, you got kids, you got a house,
right.
And the cycle just constantly repeats.
And that is really devastating information, right? But it's really true. And I think what we're trying to do, we want, when people hear this, we don't want them to feel all is lost. But the thing is, when we know about this, then we can take those same things that you've described as accomplishments and be smarter about what to do next. Right. And so I think, as someone having my bachelor's and my master's degree, I think about sometimes, Gina, with all the classes that I took. There was so many classes that I didn't need that they make you take.
Right.
You're just spending more and more and more money for classes that you really don't necessarily need, that are not focused on what you really want to get your degree in or what you really want to learn. And then when you get in the business world and you really start doing stuff, you say, man, if you would have spent more time on this, I could have been much more successful as an entrepreneur, or managing my money, or even in life itself. So it seems like all of it is, built in a way where it focuses us on spending and not really realizing the knowledge that we're lacking.
Right. So if you take it from the perspective of getting your benefits afterwards, so it's like you've gone to school, you work your job, and at the very end, you may get a little something. What we want to show people is you can still be educated, you can still have a job,
right,
but change how you do things to get what is due now. And then by the time you get older, you're ready to retire, you'll have things set up in a way that you really have some type of wealth for yourself.
Right.
Instead of depending on a job or even your entrepreneurship.
Yeah.
So there's different ways to just rethink how you do something. What was the big deal about using the bathrooms, whether or not they were segregated or not?
Right.
It was just a bathroom.
Right.
It's the same concept today. What does it really matter, whether or not you can do one thing or the other? So it doesn't really matter that you have a job or you're an entrepreneur, but if you extract that and say, okay, this is life,
right,
how can I use these rules to better benefit myself?
Right, because really all of it is a source of income, right? Entrepreneurship, you're at a job, whatever you do, it's a source of income. It's what I do with that income and the discipline that I have and the decisions I make that determine, do I continue the bondage cycle or the freedom cycle?
Right.
And that's what we really want to give away. And let me bring in another word real quick into this. We go back to our slides here, and that's the word debt. So, I mean, if there was ever a addiction in America, it's an addiction to debt. And there's a system to almost set us up to be in debt from jump. And I know you've done loans, you've done a lot of different things in your career, but how significant do you think debt is in this situation in terms of keeping us in bondage?
It's horrible because they want you to see, buy this product, it makes you somebody, but then it turns around and keeps you in debt. And so it's like getting everything without working for something.
That's really good. I don't want to cut you off, but that's really good. Buy this product, it makes you somebody.
Yeah.
Because really, all the entertainers, the athletes, everything, if they find someone that looks a certain way or can jump real high, they dangle them in front of all of us and say, you got to spend everything you ever had to be them.
Right, it's just economics. But the sad thing is they teach you that to begin with, so that you spend all your money, so you never have any money left over to even buy and invest, so that you can't really ever build anything. And so it's another way to oppress you. It's like the bathroom laws. It's
Right.
like, I hate to use that, but it's just the reality.
Right.
So if you keep people oppressed through making them think they have something, you're still keeping them down. It's like the
Right.
person that rolls up in a new Mercedes and yet they living at their grandmama's house.
That's right.
It's like, who would
That's
do
right.
that?
Yeah.
But that's what's being peddled, to make you feel good about yourself, to give you value, or to show people that you have something.
Right.
But you really don't have anything but a smoke and mirror show, which is the whole thing that things are really based upon, is appearance of stuff.
Right, and it becomes, the bondage becomes that I measure success by how I look and what I have, and how people esteem me to be by what flashes that that I might have with me, versus really what I own and my true economic position. And I think that's the greatest smoke and mirror of all, of what is the measurement of success.
Right, but if you can turn that and gain things, there's nothing that will do you like success. So for example, if you really actually, when I see people that are down, I always say to myself, they've not had enough victories in life. Because they value the wrong thing. But when you start gaining victories, like you bought your first house, and you've seen the tax breaks, or you buy a couple of properties, well, you start to have your own built-in value, that I've accomplished things. I didn't follow the route. I did it based on extracting what was good, and I'm actually really doing something.
Right.
Then you can use those real estates if you really have to have some of those other things, but always have something to pay for it.
Right.
So if you want a new car, have a piece of real estate that produces enough residual income to pay for it.
Yeah, and I think it's a major epiphany and sense of liberation when you make some of your first decisions in life that were based on the right thing.
Right.
You know, the right goals, because you're thinking more about how to be financially secure, how to create wealth. And sometimes it means passing on what was flashy or what the norms of society would tell you to do, but you really feel good on the inside when you find out you made the right call and you start to see that economically, you're so glad that you did.
Right, well, it also gives you that freedom, and it also gives you rest. Do you know what it's like to keep a hustle up all the time? I mean, gee, you know, you constantly having to hustle to get the money together, and that's what causes people to rob and people to do things that are not well.
It's true.
But it's because they don't have any means, and then when they get desperate and they have to keep up that appearance so that they don't lose who they think they are,
Right.
then they start doing other things, and it increases crime. But if you could get away from that mentality and start really giving people victories in life and really helping them to build something, the home life would be better, your state of mind would be better. You know,
Yeah.
you really are building on real true things versus fake stuff.
Yeah, and I know back in the days of segregation, I'll say this in closing, people would say that they needed segregation because there was a certain class of people who were more prone to crime, and you know, they were inherently criminal. And I love what Dr. King said, that poverty, ignorance, and disease, it'll breed crime, whatever the racial group may be. And it was a horrible logic to use the results of segregation as the argument to continue it, because really when you segregate, you started to see that people, you know, really at the end of the day, if you don't have money, if you can't eat, if you don't have health care, it's going to drive and bring the worst out of any race. And so that's why, again, we have to arm ourselves to give those things to our family so we can bring the best out of ourselves instead of the worst.
Very good, very good.
Well, this has been great. And I want to, again, we're going to take one last break and I'm going to introduce our next show, but I'm going to tell you ahead of time, we're going to have a part 2. That is going to be our next show because, Gina, we got a lot more to say. We talked a lot today about the bondage and a little bit about the freedom that we need to introduce the thinking. But when we talk again, I'm looking forward to going deeper into, now what do I do? What do I do now? And what are some real things that I could start to do and think about to head towards that freedom? So I'm taking it that you're going to be willing to come back and do that show with me.
I'm ready.
All right. Well, thank you so much. I'm going to take a quick break here, and when I come back, I'm going to close things out and again officially introduce our next show. We'll be right back.
We are starting a movement called You Are a CEO. You are a CEO. You run the business of you, and you can go as far as you want to go. Be the CEO of your future. Be the CEO of your destiny. Be the CEO of your career. Be the CEO of being an entrepreneur. As of today, my past does not matter. I am officially stepping into my new position. I am powerful. I know what I have to do. I am smart. I am able. I refuse to look back. Anything that ever hurt me has now become my fuel. I will make no excuses. I am now a high achiever. I am now an executive. I am the CEO of me.
Hello, everyone. I just hope you've enjoyed this show as much as I have. This has been a great show, Freedom Through Real Estate. And I want to remind you, if you are new to the movement, make sure you go to our website at urco.com. Join the movement, be a part of what we're doing, and let's put that website up there for you. If you're not used to going there, urco.com. I also want to remind you that we always are talking about live, learn, and earn. We live the life. We're learning, wonderful things like you heard in this show, having self-leadership intelligence flowing throughout the URCO community, and we also believe in earning through our affiliate program. Now, I want to remind you, as I've already said, that our next show is going to be on October 28th, Freedom Through Real Estate Part 2, and you do not want to miss this show. This show is going to go deeper. We're going to give some solutions, and so make sure you are a part of that because there's some things that you do not want to miss, and I look forward to seeing you on our next show. And until now and then, get out there and let the whole world know that you are a CEO.